world is watching a fragile quiet that may not last. Across West Asia, words have hardened into warnings, and warnings have opened the door to possible action that could reach far beyond the region. Tonight's report is about a message heard in city squares and military command centers alike, a message from Iran's aerospace leadership that has been blunt, uncompromising, and aimed straight at the economic arteries of the world. Brigadier General Sayed Majid Mousavi, newly appointed commander of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Aerospace Force, delivered a statement that left little room for doubt. He said any act of aggression against Iran would trigger a response dictated not just by military strategy, but by the will of the Iranian people, and he warned that any country that allowed its territory or resources to be used by the United States for attacks on Iran would face catastrophic consequences. Those are not the kinds of words that are easily walked back. The appointment that puts Mousavi in this role was confirmed last year after a period of turmoil and the killing of a senior commander. Underscore source equals OpenAI. The tenor of the message was simple and stark. Should the ceasefire, tenuous and temporary, collapse, Iran would not limit its response to tit-for-tat military strikes. Instead, it suggested a strategy aimed at the Gulf's energy infrastructure, the pipelines, refineries, terminals, and shipping lanes through which the world's oil flows. Mousavi's warning that cooperation in attacks on Iran could lead to a near-total disruption of oil production across West Asia has put traders, ministers, and diplomats on high alert. For markets already jittery, the idea of a deliberate attempt to choke supply is an alarming scenario with immediate consequences for prices, inflation, and growth around the globe. On the streets of Iran, the message found an audience. Public rallies, large demonstrations displaying solidarity with the armed forces have been a recurring sight, with thousands turning out in support of the country's military posture. The commander praised that unity, describing a population ready to bear costs and sacrifices. Behind the public slogans, however, Mousavi made a tactical point. Forces remain on high alert even during a ceasefire, and missile units are prepared should the situation deteriorate. That combination of popular mobilization and military readiness creates a volatile mix, especially when the rhetoric is tied directly to the region's most strategic economic resource. Diplomacy, for now, is the thread holding the lid on this brewing pressure cooker. Washington, Tehran, and regional capitals have all engaged in back-channel negotiations and public statements. In the midst of rising tensions, the U.S. president announced a temporary extension of the ceasefire, framing it as a pause designed to allow time for talks to continue. The president that's also said U.S. forces will maintain a blockade on Iranian-linked shipping and be ready to act if negotiations fail. Those moves have been described publicly as conditional. The pause will last only until a coherent proposal emerges from Tehran and until talks yield clarity. The man in the Oval Office who made that declaration was elected to a second term in early 2025 and remains the country's chief executive as the crisis unfolds. That political calculus has a human face in the corridors of capitals trying to avert a wider war. Pakistan's leadership, according to multiple accounts, stepped into the breach, urging restraint and pressing Washington to delay immediate military action. High-level outreach from Islamabad from both political and military offices reportedly helped persuade Washington to pause and extend the temporary truce. The dynamic underscores how regional play, years fearful of instability spreading across borders and seas, are actively trying to shape outcomes in real time. Pakistan's top military figure and the country's prime minister have both been prominent in recent diplomacy and regional forums, amplifying Islamabad's role as a mediator at a delicate moment. But the ceasefire is brittle. Confusion, contradiction, and the lack of a clear framework for what comes next have left everyone guessing about the next trigger point. One crucial theater of that guesswork is the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow choke point through which an outsized share of the world's seaborne oil passes. Control of the strait is not just symbolic. It is materially decisive. In recent weeks, Iranian authorities have claimed the ability to regulate passage, at times restricting transit and at other moments allowing traffic on passage under certain terms. Those actions carry a powerful message. Rather than a blanket closure, Tehran appears to be asserting authority by controlling who moves, when and under what conditions. That approach can be aimed at projecting power without immediately provoking a full international naval confrontation, but it also offers Iran leverage in any standoff over blockades or sanctions. Reports that two vessels were attacked while attempting to transit the strait during heightened restriction periods add to the risk calculus. Whether these incidents are framed as law enforcement, interdiction of suspect vessels, or deliberate escalation depends on which government's narrative takes hold in international fora. For traders and shipping companies, the result is the same. Routes become riskier, insurance premiums climb, and the cost of moving energy supplies rises in ways that ripple through the global economy. For markets, the threat is not an abstract one. Even rumors of significant supply Disruption can cause spikes in oil prices within hours, translating into higher fuel costs at pumps and upward pressure on inflation. Central banks and finance ministries watch these moves closely. An extended period of elevated energy costs can force policymakers into difficult choices between supporting growth or taming inflation. Oil-dependent economies in the Gulf also face a paradox. Their resources are their strength, but in an all-or-nothing confrontation, they could become the very leverage that triggers economic pain for themselves and for trading partners. On the diplomatic front, the messaging is similarly complex. Tehran's public statements emphasize sovereignty and a willingness to defend national dignity. Washington's public posture stresses deterrence and readiness to respond if threatened. Regional capitals from Riyadh to Abu Dhabi to Islamabad are balancing national interests with concerns about escalation outside actors, including major energy importers and multilateral institutions are quietly monitoring supply chains, contingency stocks, and alternative routing options. The world's nervousness is reflected in swift consultations. Ministers confer, embassies circulate warnings, and multinational oil firms convene emergency meetings. In the short term, what matters most is whether the parties can translate a pause into a structured negotiation. A ceasefire without a roadmap is merely a pause between crises. The U.S. president's conditional extension put the onus on Tehran to present a coherent proposal, a demand that in practice is complicated by internal politics, competing power centers, and domestic pressures inside Iran. A public call for more time could be read in multiple ways: as a genuine effort to find a diplomatic pathway, as a tactical maneuver to regroup, or as a stalling tactic while military preparations continue. There is also an information war playing out. Each side seeks to shape international perception, to paint its actee as defensive, the other side's moves as provocative, and its own measures as calibrated and legitimate. That matters because global audiences, from commodity traders to foreign ministers, often act on narrative as much as on raw facts. When a strike on an energy asset is credibly threatened, behavior changes, tankers shift course, shipping firms reroute, and buyers scramble to secure alternate supplies. Those practical responses have immediate economic costs that can quickly cascade. Behind the scenes, intelligence assessments and military planners on all sides are recalibrating. Commanders speak of readiness, logistics teams run contingency scenarios, and hotlines between allies and regional partners buzz with urgent calls. None of this guarantees escalation, but the window for miscalculation is open. A single misinterpreted movement, a misfired missile, or an attack on a vessel with civilians aboard could turn a tense pause into an all-out confrontation before diplomats can CTT for ordinary people far from the Gulf. The stakes may feel remote until they are not. Higher prices at the pump, volatility in grocery costs, and disruptions to manufacturing supply chains are all plausible consequences of sustained instability. Policymakers in import-dependent economies must weigh those downstream effects against the human and strategic questions at play in West Asia. There are, of course, paths to de-escalation, structured negotiations that address security concerns, mutual steps to reduce provocative military posturing, and third-party mediation that helps bridge trust gaps can all reduce the likelihood of conflict. Economic incentives, phase confidence-building measures, and verifiable mechanisms for assuring unimpeded commercial transit through strategic waterways are practical tools that have worked in other crises. But they require political will and time, both of which are in short supply when rhetoric and force posture are climbing. A second risk is the temptation to treat retaliation as a purely military calculus. Targeting energy infrastructure is not only strategically consequential, it is politically explosive. Striking the physical conduits of oil production or distribution touches civilian livelihoods, global commerce, and international law. The commander's stark suggestion that countries colluding with attacks on Iran would face catastrophic consequences is therefore more than saber-rattling. It is an explicit attempt to expand the cost equation beyond the battlefield to deter cooperation and to reshape allies' risk calculations. For leaders weighing options, they must ask, what is the intended objective, and are the means proportionate to the aim? Military planners will compute casualty estimates and asset vulnerability. Economists will model supply shocks. Diplomats will measure reputational costs and long-term alliances. And citizens will measure the immediate impact on their daily lives, decisions taken in the next few. Days could set a pattern for months to come. There is also an element of domestic politics in play. Public rhetoric, troop posturing, and national solidarity rallies serve internal purposes as much as external ones. Leaders who appear to stand firm domestically can consolidate support. Those perceived to cede too much may find themselves weakened at home. That dynamic complicates international negotiation because concessions are harder to accept when they risk political capital. So what happens next? It is impossible to predict with certainty. The most optimistic path is steady diplomacy, a timetable for talks, reciprocal de-escalation steps, and international guarantees for commercial passage that preserve both security and commerce. The worst-case scenario is a rapid slide into strikes and counterstrikes that target critical infrastructure, trigger wider regional involvement, and send shockwaves through global markets. In the meantime, the responsible response from policymakers, second market actors, is to prepare without provoking. That means strengthening communication channels, clarifying rules of engagement, and making contingency plans for energy supplies, shipping diversions, and humanitarian needs. It means giving diplomats the space to work and intelligence analysts the data they need to distinguish posturing from imminent threats. For the people of the region, the human cost is already real in the form of anxiety, displacement, and economic uncertainty. For the rest of the world, the potential for economic pain is real and immediate. The pathway to avoiding both is narrow, but not closed. It requires political judgment, careful diplomacy, and perhaps most importantly, a shared recognition that the price of escalation would be paid far beyond any single battlefield. As the clock ticks on this precarious pause, three things will matter most: whether meaningful, verifiable progress can be made at the negotiating table, whether maritime safety and the flow of sea commerce can be guaranteed in practice rather than just on paper, and whether leaders on all sides can resist the temptation to let domestic pressures push them toward irreversible actions. Tonight, the warning from Iran's aerospace commander hangs heavy over the international agenda. It is a reminder that in an interconnected world, local conflict can become global risk in a matter of hours. The coming days will test whether diplomacy, prudence, and patience can hold back a storm, and whether the many actors involved can choose de-escalation over confrontation when the costs are measured not only in lives, but in livelihoods around the world.